Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AI Monetization Podcast by Project Pro. I'm Binny, co-founder of Project Pro. As you know, at this podcast, we speak to industry leaders about what business outcomes they've been achieving with AI. Today, we are honored to have Brijesh Singh. Brijesh is the Senior Vice President of Global Go-to-Market and Head of AI Data and Analytics at Wipro, which is obviously a $35 billion software solutions company and leader in that space. Brijesh is very relevant to this conversation because he has had hands-on experience helping 15 plus AI and data-led transformation programs for Fortune 500 companies. He's built capabilities of over 3,000 AI ML practitioners across multiple countries. And as an illustrious career, previously he was a partner, managing director at Deloitte, partnered Verizon, and previously at IBM and Siemens. Brijesh, thanks for taking time. Welcome.
Vinny, thank you so much. That's humbling introduction, and I'm really pleased to have a conversation with you and share my experiences and my learnings, particularly in the past, I would say, 8 to 9 years, when I began my journey in the world of automation, predominantly enabled by AI and data-led transformation.
Thank you. Looking forward to that, Brijesh.
Sure.
And the first thing we were curious about is, given that you've been doing GTM for, like you said, automation and data-led transformation, and now there is AI-led transformation, what is the difference in the GTM motions for these two? And is there a difference?
That's a very interesting question, I would say. And my quick answer is yes, there is a difference. But there is a difference with a subtlety that I would like to explain to the audience here.
Yeah.
So data and data transformation has been part of the culture for enterprises for the past, I would say, 2 to 2.5 decades. Organizations started harnessing the power of data starting the first decade of the new millennium, and bringing data in the data warehouses, data marts, data lakes, and then developing analytic solutions on top of those data marts and data lakes, right? They came out of the business need, but driven predominantly from a technology lens, right? Whereas, as we started the AI-led journey in the middle of the last decade, around that time frame, particularly since Google's transformer model came out, which helped us look at the natural language processing in a very different way, right? With the neural networks, the way they started processing natural languages, and then coming up with cogent responses, businesses started to look at it differently. So if you add now the 2.5 years ago, generative AI that came on top of that transformer model, which started creating content, right? Which the traditional AI algorithms did not create. The traditional, for us geeks, known as discriminative AI, were there to predict, to optimize, to classify, etc., etc. But now there was a creation going on. So the transition that happened or is happening as I speak is from being a technology-led lens to a business-led lens. Because even though data programs, when the consolidation of data was happening 2 decades ago, 2.5 decades ago, and so on, the end game was always to provide insights for businesses, right? Based on the structured content that existed in various databases across the organization, right? Now, the transformation is not just limited to the structured content, but all kinds of contents, audio, video, various kinds of texts. So all put together, how now I run my business and execute my business differently? That is the question that is coming out in front of enterprises. So new business models are being designed and created. Hence, the AI go to market has to be looked from that lens, that starting point is impact on my current business,
Mhm.
and how do I do my business differently
Mhm.
because of all the tools and techniques available to me.
Right.
Well, I will add one more thing there, Binny.
Mhm.
The data-led transformation, the conversations were with the data officers, with the technology officers, with the information officers, because they were the ones who would know about the Teradatas, the Informaticas of the world, right?
Yeah.
Uh, those conversations did not happen with the lines of business head, the C-suites, the board
Mhm.
members, and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas with OpenAI dropping ChatGPT in our labs in the November, December of 2023,
Mhm.
and all board members and all C-suites and CEOs and everybody now on their smart devices, whether iPads or iPhones or any smartphone, now they all have direct access. And because of that direct access, they are the ones that are asking questions. Hey, if I can get this answer from this from my device, why aren't you guys doing it? And they're asking their lines of business heads, right?
Mhm.
So the conversation is trickling down from the business side of the house to the technology side of the house. Hence, that subtle shift in the go to market that you asked me earlier.
Very, very interesting. I think the business and technology lens you framed it under is very insightful. And you're saying that earlier conversations used to be with the IT tech teams largely, but now the VP sales, VP marketing, VP ops, a lot of your time and conversations are there as well in AI.
Absolutely. Your last two words were very important as
Mhm.
well. That the
As well.
conversations are not just limited to one side of the house,
Hmm.
they are all over the place,
Yeah,
including the businesses, and in many cases, led and driven by businesses.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. The next question, Brijesh, is, I'm asking this question because this is something I've heard in many of the podcasts earlier as a challenge, which is, and the challenge is largely from the tech side of the org, where people say, hey, one of the biggest challenges I face with senior leadership, the C-level leadership, is that they use GPT in their phones and iPads, like you said, and they want to take the GPT, I mean, the Gen AI hammer to every problem in the company. How do I help them understand you don't need that for all problems, and this is what you need? And what are your guidance on how should somebody do that?
Uh, that's the question of the hour, right?
Okay, okay.
Since GPT, there are various other models that have come out in the
Mm,
marketplace from various
mm,
different companies, right? The hyperscalers like Microsofts and Googles and Amazons of the world and IBMs of the world, they
mhm.
have their own foundation models, language models, all various kinds of models that they have come out.
Yeah,
So have various new age companies like the Anthropics and Cohere's and OpenAI, of course, is there in the mix, and
yeah.
various others. They, the dialogue is that all of these models, at the end of the day, are statistical algorithms.
Mm,
And statistical algorithms, the way they work, is their behavior varies based on the data. So even if a particular model is available in the market and that is trained with certain kind of data, when I would like to use it for my business needs,
mm,
I would still have to evaluate that model, that whether it will serve me and my business needs in the way I would want it to.
mhm,
And in that evaluation process, I may find out that maybe there is another model that is serving me better. I would also find out that, let's say I have n number of business needs and business functions. Each of those business functions may not get addressed by the same model in
mm.
the same way in terms of performance, in terms of accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. So there are various parameters to be considered.
Yeah.
So this is what we have done when we executed programs with traditional machine learning algorithms.
Mhm,
When say we were trying to create a forecasting models, we will work with various models and look at the data set, train various models with various data sets, come out with the outcome, and look at various, parameters. I'm not going to go into the technical details of this for the purpose of this conversation, but the goal was which model is performing the best for my data. That is still the goal.
Mm.
That is still the goal when I'm using a generative AI language model or a foundation model, right? So
Yeah.
that's where for every enterprise, that preparation is needed, that evaluation is needed, right? And then identification of use cases, that which use cases are yielding more value for you. That does Gen AI apply to almost everything you do? Or does AI even apply to almost everything you do? The
Mhm.
short answer is probably yes. But does it apply in a way that your value, your benefit is more than the effort and the cost that you would put in to get
Mhm.
that value? That's the analysis that needs to be done. How long will it take you to get there, right? So
Yeah.
that's the fundamental approach that we have taken when we go
Right.
out in the marketplace and work with our clients.
Right. No, that's a very good point. At some level, these LLMs are literally magic, what they can do. And there is almost nothing in a company I can think of that will not be impacted by it. But like you said, it's really about the ROI. How much are you putting in? What are you getting out of it? And then you kind of prioritize based on that. Makes
Exactly.
sense. Okay. And you said something interesting earlier in this conversation. You casually mentioned the AI revolution started in the middle of the last decade, which is very interesting because a lot of us think that it's in the last 2 years, but that's the Gen AI part of it. And I'm curious, Brijesh, in your conversations, the Gen AI aspect of the AI revolution, what has it done? Is it opening up an entire new class of problems that you were never discussing before with leadership? Or is it largely taking the problems you were already discussing and making it a lot more effective and faster to implement? What is mostly you're seeing?
Actually, both.
Hmm.
So I'll give you examples.
Hmm.
So before uh, 2023,
Yeah.
when generative AI came in our lives, and OpenAI had created GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, which all of us geeks were following, many of you all were following and
Mhm.
seeing the evolution, which is baseline on the transformer model that Google had created, right? Uh, Regardless of a language model not being out in the marketplace, there were various AI solutions that were being built. One
Hmm.
example that comes to my mind is building a uh, conversational system
Hmm.
to address the needs of customer care. Customer care is an area where, if my memory serves me right, global 2000 companies spend about 600 to 700 billion dollars a year um, in making sure that their customers are happy.
Hmm.
But regardless of that spend, many customers are not happy. So as a result, the net promoter score is low, the customer satisfaction surveys yield lower scores, and customer lifetime value goes down, right? So organizations have been trying to work with humans to ensure that happens in a manner that all those three things that I mentioned and many more, they stay up. Artificial intelligence came in to help with the process, and by the way, very highly cost deterministic, because it's all human cost.
Hmm.
And I would say about 70 to 80% of customer care cost is about human cost. 20 to 30% is infrastructure, real estate, utilities, everything else.
Hmm.
So the in the about 2015, 2016, 2017, we started working on building conversational systems for organizations, leveraging the tools and techniques available in the marketplace with NLU, NLP, NLG, etc., which were limited, but we started working. Now, did we achieve good results with them? Of course, the answer is yes. There are various programs that I personally executed where we resulted in about 80 plus percent
Hmm.
of phone calls that were handled by human beings now being completely handled by machines. right?
Yeah.
In a natural language conversation with a high customer satisfaction above 4.5 on a scale of 0 to 5. NPS score moving 30 to 40 points in a positive direction.
Mhm.
Now, you now bring in generative AI, right? And now couple that with the traditional discriminative AI capabilities that were there in the marketplace. Now you have augmented that significantly, where you have pre-trained the model, fine-tuned the model, applied techniques like RAG, for example, and created those vectored stores through the embedding techniques. And now your models are performing in a significantly better way. Your answers are more accurate. Your
Mhm.
answers are more transparent. Your answers have less toxicity. You are spending less calories in terms of energy in getting the same answer, right? You're not always going to the model to get the answer. You're caching it, storing it to the local store. So all these newer techniques have enabled you to
Mhm.
further increase that CSAT, further increase that NPS, further increase the CLTV. So there are applicability of both combined discriminative and generative AI. Are there places where the pure play generative AI is making a difference in the marketplace? Yes. Take a software development lifecycle, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
As a developer, the process was that business gives the requirement, then someone takes the requirement, an analyst, and creates what we used to call functional specifications, right? And then somebody would, with the technical knowledge, would take that and create a technical specification. And then someone else, or maybe the same person, would go and actually write code based on those technical specifications, test it, various levels of testing. And then somebody would go and deploy the entire DevOps process in the SDLC cycle. Now, that process is significantly impacted with generative AI
Mhm.
because you can now fine tune, train, prepare, right? A model where all the existing functions, specifications, business requirements, code, test specifications that you have. And then you can use that model through prompt engineering to write code for you. Now, would
Mhm.
that code be, some might argue, 100% accurate? Might not be, at least
Yeah.
today, let's say, for
Mhm.
argument's sake. Would it be 60%, 70% accurate? Likely, yes. So the effort is getting reduced. So instead of writing the code from scratch, now I'm giving prompts to write the code, and the code comes out. And my job as a developer is to QA the code and fix it, which takes less time. So
Yeah.
these are the areas where we are seeing generative AI being really impactful. And there are various examples, just the two that came to my mind that I wanted to cite out.
Mhm. Yeah, no, those are pretty solid use cases and examples, Brijesh. And as you discuss these use cases and consider these use cases inside an enterprise, what are some of the top challenges that you face to kind of either step one, get a POC going, and step two, go from POC to production?
So the between, I would say, January, February of 2023, so
Mhm.
sorry, January, February of 2024,
Mm.
and now, right? We have seen uh, abundance of proofs of concepts and pilots. Everybody is curious and everybody is wanting to learn about this technology, understand this technology, and take advantage of it, right?
Mhm.
It makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, but is the transfer rate from the POC pilot to deployment and scale same or rapid? The answer is not yet, right? And organizations have learned through that. But what I'm seeing and observing in the marketplace today, that many organizations who took a lead and who did these experimentations in the first half of the current year, fiscal year, calendar year, now they are spearheading and really speeding up the process of scaling. right? It's a natural evolutionary process. Whenever there's a new technology that comes in the marketplace, all of us,
Mhm.
it's a basic human nature that we want to be cautious about it, right? And we
Mhm.
want to experiment, learn. Yes, so that's what we have done. We understood the learnings and working principles of cloud-based language models. We understood the workings and basic principles of open source models that we can deploy within our four boundary walls,
Mhm.
on our premises.
Mhm.
And we have understood the need of various use cases and data that we have, where some use cases might suggest that I'm okay in going to a cloud-based language model or a foundation model, and I can fine-tune the model with my data. I'm not really exposing myself with a risk factor coming into play, and I'll be
Mhm.
okay with that. But for some other use cases with some other data sets that I might have, I need the model within my four boundary walls. So there I might pick another model, open source or whatnot, and I bring it in my within my boundary walls, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
these are the lessons we have learned. How do we prepare a model? Fine tuning is a technique where you can train it with the data. I mentioned about RAG, where you don't want your data to go and sit in someone else's database. You can create your own vector scores, you can create embeddings, and
Mhm.
you can then prepare a model to be used in your production environment. So folks are doing that.
Mhm.
Um, there are gaps in technology
Yeah.
in terms of APIs available to use these models. We all know all models are accessible, but they may not yield the result in the manner that we want. What I mean by that, the result may not be as accurate as we want the result to be when I ask a question,
Mhm.
or it may not be accurate 10 out of 10 times when I ask the question.
Yeah.
It may be giving inaccurate results that I don't want it to be giving. Or it may be giving right answer to a question that I don't want anybody asking. And somebody's asking it, I don't want that answer to be provided. So
Mhm.
how do I, mitigate all of these things and put guardrails around that? There are techniques and tools being developed by system integrators like us and various others in the marketplace that making use of these models, the practical application, those things are happening as we speak. And they are also assisting in the process of pilot to scale that you asked about.
That's very, very well said on how the transition from idea to POC and then POC to production scale happens. And as a enterprise navigates this journey, how should one think about, uh, you know, typically when somebody is using SaaS software, you think of cost as I'm going to pay for licenses and how much it's going to cost. If it's cloud, you probably think about I'm going to pay for EC2 and things like that. And with with AI or Gen AI, everybody's thinking, oh, I have to pay for the API calls I'm doing. How does one think about cost when going about an AI project, other than just the API cost that the managed service model providers serve?
No, that's a great question. Um, I actually did a podcast with an analyst firm called Horses for Sources (HFS),
Yeah.
and where we had exclusively discussed the
Mhm.
cost associated with AI and generative AI, right,
Mhm.
and the ROI of it.
Mhm.
So there are predominantly when we are using a cloud native model, uh, the cost is all about the consumption of those cloud resources,
Mhm.
basically the compute resources, network resources, and storage resources. That's what you're paying for, right? And when you're the compute resource in the case of generative AI models, that cost is significantly high. So the more you are trying to train them, whether you actually get that resource from a cloud service provider or you do it yourself within your own four boundary walls, you have to pay for it, right?
Mhm.
And the more you train, fine tune, or contextualize a model with your own data, the more that cost would be, right? The more you are going to the model with your question the more that cost would be. So how do you apply certain techniques to minimize all this? How do you minimize the uh, the variety of models that are exploding in the marketplace? How do you consolidate around that, that only a select few models, if possible maybe one or two or three, can serve all your needs,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that's where the industry is heading in, right?
Mhm.
And then that's the consumption aspect of it.
Mhm.
But then also the use case aspect that we talked about earlier
Mhm.
is, I have a wish list from my organization of 300, 400, in some cases 500 use cases, right?
Mhm.
Are they really 300, 400, 500 use cases that I should be executing? Or are they 50? Are there 75 or
Mhm.
100
Mhm.
that are going to yield me maximum value, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what are those? How do I prioritize those use cases?
Mhm.
Which ones are making most impact?
Mhm.
Another aspect that comes into play is the preparation for the consumption of various use cases.
Mhm.
How do I ensure that I'm not going to incur technical debt? I'm not going to duplicate the efforts across various silos of my organization. There
Mhm.
are certain things that can be done once and should be done once, right? And then everybody should take advantage of that thing that has been done once, right?
Wow.
How do
Right.
I create a model, an operating model,
Mhm.
um, a COE, a Center of Excellence concept,
Mhm.
where the common activities
Mhm.
are identified
Yeah.
and built once, and then uncommon activities and they are then built and performed on top of those common activities, right?
Mhm.
But how
Yeah.
do I also not impede the process and
Mhm.
progress, that I spend too much time, energy, and effort in building those common activities, and I'm lagging behind because I'm not really going out in the market with my business use cases? So that balance, how do I do this responsibly so that I have a net negative impact on the environment? Uh,
Mhm.
I do not burn enough calories and consume enough energy, creating the side effect on the climate that we all are aware that we are causing as Homo sapiens, right?
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
do I ensure that responsibility is not only about towards my planet and climate, but towards fellow human beings?
Mhm.
That these models are trained with the existing data that we have, and how do we ensure that we try to minimize the homogeneity from the data, try to minimize toxicity from the data, the
Mhm.
biasness from the data,
Mhm.
so that the data doesn't make our model learn
Mhm.
certain things that we don't want our model to learn. Because then
Mhm.
when we use those models in our business purposes, in our
Yeah.
personal purposes, it will lead and guide us in a direction we don't want the model to be. So that's our responsibility towards society and towards fellow human beings as well. So
Mhm.
all those aspects need to be considered carefully
Mhm.
without impeding the speed to market
Mhm.
and progress in the society.
Oh, it's a fantastic framework and kind of guidance pointers to kind of go down how to think about from AI strategy to actually implementation by keeping in mind governance and risk. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
that's where Binny, when in my previous employment,
Mhm.
I had built the AI strategy offering
Yeah.
and built it from scratch, in
Mhm.
which the whole idea was that organizations have to understand
Mhm.
where they are on the maturity curve.
Mhm.
And AI, as you started this conversation, that
Mhm.
is this a business thing or is this a technical thing?
Mhm.
And I think we sort of came to uh, a conclusion drawn thus far is that it is somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
right? It is
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle. It is neither 100% technical nor 100% business.
Yeah.
And it is becoming part of the mainstream strategy.
Right.
I personally don't know of any organization where AI is not in the conversation as part of their strategy going
Yeah.
forward.
It's
So it
amazing,
is
right?
these strategies. So AI strategy and business strategy are becoming synonymous, right? And when I built that offering for my
Mm.
previous employer,
Mm.
uh, and we all the clients that we went out to, Fortune
Mm,
500 companies that we serve,
mm,
the idea was to understand the gaps, to
yeah.
understand the gaps in capability on all three dimensions in
Mm,
terms of skills and people,
mm,
talent, that
mm,
these require new talent. How many people had heard the word prompt engineering 3 or 4 years ago, right? And even today, many have just scratched the surface, right?
yeah.
How many people had known about what a transformer model technique is, right?
Yeah.
So these are the things that we need to understand from a skill gap, talent gap, technology gap, and process,
Mm,
that a business function that I did in a certain way, does
mm,
it need to be done in the same way going forward?
mm,
Because now the technology is enabling me to think very differently,
mm,
right? I'll give an
mm,
example. I worked with an insurance company a few years back
mm,
out in the West Coast here in
mm,
the US, where one of the business process was that the emails from the customers would come in a central location, and from the central location, humans would process it, and then it would be dispersed to the centers where certain types of emails, the categories of emails will be processed, right? And we were trying to automate this function using the automation technique available around, this is about 2016, 2017, I'm talking about. And we were like, this process now with the automation tools and techniques available to us can be completely changed. Now, the emails can be processed by the technology and classified on what they are about and be sent directly. So this central entity doesn't need to exist anymore. Can be sent directly to those areas where it needs to
mm,
be processed. So
mm.
that's a revamping of the thinking of how I executed my business function yesterday versus how I will execute tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a fantastic example. It goes back to thinking before you solve the problem, you're asking, is that the right problem to solve? Has the problem really changed based on what's available right now? Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm. I had a question. There were 2 points you made, Brijesh. Earlier in the conversation, you talked about how a lot of your conversations are also with the business unit leaders, everybody wanting kind of AI solutions for their workflows. And then now you're also mentioned that it is very important that companies figure out what reusable components that they can build, which are one-time things, and then they build one-off stuff on top of that. So the question I had was, given that AI at some level exists on a knowledge graph, and as the AI is better the given the more data it can see all across the company, and if people across teams go ahead and build these piecemeal solutions, how do you have this conversation about, hey, this has to be something strategic, the knowledge graph has to be cross company, you're kind of building off that knowledge graph. How do you get that alignment across multiple teams and the leadership, where somebody wants to build a one-off solution, but you're trying to get a more broad conversation in place?
Yeah, it's a good question. I look at it slightly differently, Binny.
Hmm. Hmm.
Knowledge graph, in my opinion, doesn't have to be centralized.
Okay.
Uh, there are various techniques that in the modern world of data
Hmm.
that we have become familiar with and we have
Hmm.
started using,
Hmm.
that those techniques enable us to use data in a manner that data can still be siloed,
Hmm.
but can help serve a centralized goal. Data mesh, for example, comes to my mind, right? Where through microservices, we access data from wherever it is and access in a rapid succession in a manner that I can leverage it for the business use that I want that data to be used for. In my humble opinion, it is not just about more data when it comes to AI. It is about right data at the right time with the right velocity. So the the three V's of data that we are all familiar with, right? Volume, velocity, and veracity. They haven't changed when it comes to AI. We are looking for data when I'm looking at a use case, my business process, and my business process in my business area. How would I transform that business process with applicability of various tools on the AI spectrum, not just limited to one called generative AI? I'm looking at it holistically, right?
Hmm.
How would I transform it into its target state where it yields me value, not just for, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but for the next 10 years? How would I transform it into its target state where it yields me value, not just for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but for the next 10 years? How would I transform it into its target state where it yields me value, not just for saving money in terms of saving efforts, which is we all call productivity, right? That it is in giving me improved productivity. We also are bringing the lens of how it is helping me improve my margin, how it is helping me increase my growth. I bring in more revenue by increasing my customer lifetime value, by increasing my customer satisfaction, by increasing my net promoter score. All those things that we talked about earlier, right?
Mhm.
How it is increasing my employee productivity in a manner that my same employee, because the productivity has gone up, can bring in more revenue for me, right? So
Yeah.
those are the lenses that we are applying when we are looking at it. So I'm not so much worried about a centralized knowledge graph or a knowledge base that
Mhm.
organizations need to build to create AI usage
Mhm.
for various needs that run across different parts of the organization. I'm not
Yeah.
worried about that.
Got it. Got it. And I know we also wanted to discuss a couple of use cases across supply chain management and marketing. Are there some powerful use cases that you recently worked on in marketing or supply chain that you could share with us?
Supply chain is an area where I believe that, see, the thing is that AI is not new. Many organizations, like insurers, have been using statistical algorithm to develop those models.
Mhm.
Actuaries have been using it
Mhm.
to understand. It's just that the compute power wasn't there as much as it is there today with the advent of the NPUs, the GPUs, and the TPUs that has enabled us. These things have enabled us
Yeah.
to get the result quicker, right? But we have been using algorithms all along
Mhm.
on structured content for our desired purposes. In supply chain, if you look at the entire structure from source to make to store, then deliver, sell, and then serve, these are the steps in a supply chain process. In each of these process steps, huge applicability of generative and discriminative AI. In sourcing, for example, um, if I'm sourcing from hundreds of various suppliers for my needs, and I'm a global company, I'm sourcing from various places. How do I use generative AI with the existing data that I have, where I prepare an existing model with my existing data, and then model now tells me and guides me that for a product A, you don't need to go to these 20 different suppliers. You can go to just these two, and you will be far more effective,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
In my make cycle, how do I use, for example, computer vision, right, to do quality assurance and quality assessment? That when the on the assembly line, when the product is being built, how do I look at the outcome, the products that are being built through computer vision? And I have pre-trained models with the pictures and the videos that I have taken in the past. And then with a high degree of confidence, 98, 99% confidence score, say that this batch passes the quality test. How do I speed up that process? So the delay that happens through manual quality inspection can be mitigated, can be minimized, and
Yeah.
my speed to market increases. So I get the product quicker to the shelf. How
Mhm.
do I do my inventory management and my warehouse management effectively? That the no truck goes out empty, that
Mhm.
all the shelves are appropriately stacked, and no shelf remains empty. All these things can be done with the use of both combined forces. This is
Yeah.
a force multiplier of generative and discriminative AI that is positively impacting the supply chain process in its totality. So, huge applicability, and we are working with various clients where we have already yielded those results. There have been various case studies that have been published out that almost everyone is aware of.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, great point you made. AI is not new. It's always been there. The new wave is transformative, especially because of the amount of compute power available. And like today morning, I saw it in my inbox. I saw a newsletter which said the hyperscalers are going nuclear. I mean, I don't think any of us expected the hyperscalers would go and buy nuclear reactors and nuclear power generation companies, which is kind of happening right now to power all the energy needs.
Yeah, we talked
Uh,
about that, right? That
mm,
we want our planet,
mm,
we want to leave our planet in better shape for our
mm,
next generations,
mm,
and for that we need clean energy. And we
mm,
know that artificial intelligence is going to be more and more mainstream of our
mm,
lives, and
mm,
it will consume more and more energy, right? And because all these models, when we train, when we use, they consume energy.
yeah.
And when they consume this energy, where the energy is coming from? There are two sources, the fossil
Mm,
fuel and then renewables.
mm,
So organizations are taking step in that direction that I'm going to be using more and more renewables. Right? How do I use clean energy? And so I, A, do not have adverse impact on our climate. B, I serve humanity in a manner that you and I discussed earlier in the conversation.
yeah, yeah. No, very powerfully said. AI probably not only will solve our intelligence problem, but also our kind of sustainable energy problem as well.
You got
Uh,
it.
yeah, yeah, it's terrific. And one final question, Brijesh, which is you're up in front of CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, and they kind of lean on you as an expert advisor to help them guide through this maze. And there is so much happening in this space. How do you stay updated? What are your favorite resources to stay plugged in?
Uh, there is not one or two to name, but I'll tell
Mm,
you. Uh, so I was a consultant in the early part of my career. Then our daughter
mm,
was born,
mm,
and I didn't want to be a road warrior. So I quit
mm,
consulting, took up day job, and went on for almost a decade and a half to work for corporate America in a job that did not require me to travel as much,
mm,
right?
mm,
But I always missed consulting, and here's the reason why. I missed it because I recognize that it keeps me on my toes. It allows me to learn. It is always forcing me to know more than my clients
mm,
because I'm serving and servicing my clients.
yeah,
So when my daughter grew up and hit high school, I came back to consulting. And since then, for the last decade, I have been in consulting. Now, uh, there are various sources and various methods and techniques to learn. You can read from various journals and publications that I do, right, to learn about it. But my go-to source of learning is by
mm,
doing it,
mm,
right? And fortunately, the last I would say 8 to 9 years I've spent in an area with the organization that I work for, where it allowed me to stay hands-on, where I work with my clients, not just in advising them, closing the business and then walk away, but executing it, seeing the output, delivering the result, and in that process, working with various skills, various talents, from machine learning engineers to data analysts to solution architects to data scientists. And in my regular conversations and dialogue in understanding what is happening, that's
mm,
how I learn. So I stay close to what is happening on the ground, how that is being built. I provide my input and guidance based on my experience and learning.
yeah,
And I also consume the input that comes from various of those skills and sources that I just discussed.
right.
And then collaboratively, we build the optimal, better solutions for our clients.
Mhm. No, it's a fantastic story about how you crafted your career around having to spend time with your daughter, but then you still kind of found a way to go back to the other thing you're passionate about, being a consultant and how you do that. It's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that. On that note, Brijesh, thank you for your time. This has been fantastic. So much valuable insight and perspective for all of us. Thanks for your time.